Welcome to Leadership, the secret sauce, where extraordinary coaches and leaders reveal what makes them exceptional. We're your hosts, Dave Lipski and Matt Dodson. Together, let's discover our guest's secret sauce. Today's episode is brought to you by Character Matters Coaching and Consulting. At Character Matters, we believe great leadership isn't just about results. It's about who you become along the way. From career transitions to team building, we help leaders unlock clarity, build resilience, and lead authentically. Because when character grows, impact follows. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com. Today's episode is supported completely unofficially by a community we deeply believe in, the International Coaching Federation's Coaching in Organizations. If you're building or leading an internal coaching program, this is where your people find their people. It's a space to swap real stories, sharpen your craft, and stay connected to what's emerging in our field. If you haven't joined yet, take a moment to sign up and plug into the conversations shaping the future of organizational coaching. Your community is waiting, and they're ready to learn with you. Go to coachingfederation.org/coaching-in-organizations-inquiry to get started.
All right, in today's episode, we're sitting down with Mary Azzolini to uncover her secret sauce of leadership and coaching. We're going to get into her story, her challenges, and what she's learned along the way. I hope you stick around. Before I forget, I hope that you subscribe and like our podcast. It certainly helps people find us. So, Dave, can you introduce Mary to us?
Absolutely. I am excited to welcome Mary. And Mary, we usually start off. We're gonna get a chance to do more introductions, but you, Matt, and I go back a ways, so we'll get a chance to catch up and talk about things. But just to start off, what is your energy level on a scale from 1 to 10?
Wow. Well, it's Friday afternoon. I'm with two of my favorite people. I put it out of 10.
Very nice, Matt. Where are you?
You know what? I really thought, okay, it doesn't matter what Mary says. I'm going to say 8.5.
You're going to say 8.5? You know what? Just because you said that, I'm going to say 9.
Okay.
So
I know that was your anchor. I get it.
So Mary, how do you introduce yourself when somebody on the plane next to you asks you, what do you do?
Wow. You guys didn't give me this question. I introduce myself as somebody who works on helping people to understand more about themselves and also helping them to understand how to relate better with others that they work with or live with or just hang out with.
Well said.
Thanks.
Tell me, I'm going to say tell me more, but I'm going to let Matt go because he was leaning forward. He was about to say something. Matt?
All right. Mary, everybody has sort of a turning point as a leader or as when they're sort of in their story about being coached. Dave and I think you've known this as long as we've known you, that we love to spend time with coaches. That's really where we really feel like we have our best conversations oftentimes with coaches. So, and we think every coach sort of has their own story. I just want to know, like, what is, as you've been a coach for a while, how do you think about that? Like, what's your secret sauce as a coach? What makes you what makes you unique?
Yeah, it's such a cool question, right? And it sounds so simple, and yet it's so hard sometimes to answer that one. As I think back early on, I remember people saying things like, "Hey, like you've like got a way of like boiling down this really complex thing into simple parts. That's really awesome. Like, could you do more of that? We're going to call you." And people would call me for that kind of reason. And then others would say, "Hey, thanks. You're helping us to figure out how to work through this situation and help us to stay on track and keep us organized." And so when I think about it, I think that there's really 3 parts to the secret sauce. And we'll lift off the S squared component of that and we'll make it S cubed. And I would say it's a combination of like being able to sense situations and people, synthesize what's going on in their world, like all the different parts, whether it's a situational world at work or something personal in their life, and then to sustain whatever choices they make about that situation. So sense, synthesize, and sustain. That's my recipe.
There you go.
That's my sauce.
That sounds good. And when did you know that? Like, how did you stumble upon that?
I think it's been over. I don't think there's any one moment, to be honest. I think just, recently as we think about like how we represent ourselves and what is it that we want to bring to the work that we do, that's what caused me to sort of reflect back on what are the things I've heard, what are the places where it feels right. It doesn't feel complicated for me either. And, and as I reflect on those situations, that's what brings me to seeing those I don't know, those secret sauce elements.
Yeah. And if someone's shadowed you for a week, right?
Yeah.
So, and not even not just in sort of work, but even outside of work, how would they see those things? Like even in your personal interactions, not just in work.
Yeah. Well, I hope that what they would see is just a lot of like curious listening. Sorry to use all that coaching terminology, but I think that's kind of what it boils down to, right? I don't know if it's an age thing or an experience thing, whatever it is. Um, I think it's really about just sort of being present and listening to what somebody is saying. And I would attribute that to being the sensing component.
Mm.
And the more we can listen and sort of hear the different parts and be open to what those parts are, it just feels like the connections just sort of organically come into your way of thinking or my way of thinking. And then that just leads into the synthesis. And once we get started talking about that, and when we know when there's a connection with somebody and those dots as they're being connected resonate, um, the process and the relationship just takes on a life of its own. And it helps to move people forward. And that's that seems to be a recipe or sort of a situation that repeats itself over and over again for me.
Yeah. With the sensing piece, like when you're sitting across from a client and you're trying to read the
Yeah.
client to help you move towards synthesis, what
Yeah.
what are you reading? What are you seeing? What are you asking?
Um, it's pretty multisensory, Dave, honestly. There's the listen. I feel like we always start with the listening piece because that's what we're so accustomed to. And so I'm listening obviously to the words and to the story that they're telling, but in the story, listening for where's the real emphasis happening. And sometimes that's through inflection, sometimes it's through the words that they're using. And so following that pathway, following where there's something really interesting being said in the words. And simultaneously, we're looking at to the extent that we can see them, right? We're not on the phone, but if we can see them looking at their body language, it's telling us something, or it tells us as coaches, it tells us something like, are you comfortable here? Are you uncomfortable? Your shoulders coming up, there's those other cues. And then there's just something about the energy around the relationship. There's something there that we can't always put our finger on, but there's just something there that says, gee, this felt a little heavy, or this felt like there was something to explore. And just being open to asking the person I'm talking with, like, hey, I'm hearing this. Is there something here for us? Do you want to talk some more about that? And it just following all those leads, if you will.
Mm.
How about you? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, no, those absolutely resonated because the energy piece really it just fascinates me. We've brought it up a bunch recently, and just being able to read that, and then I think the I'm really interested in how you move to synthesis, like and then how like I find sometimes that the thing the person is talking about is not necessarily the most valuable thing that they really could be talking about. So
Yeah.
sometimes I have to loop back around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe even for what's not said.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole story, keeping in mind the story versus the psychology of the story, if you will. Not that we're psychologists, don't get me wrong. Um, but there's so many layers to the conversation, right?
One of our recent guests, our very recent guest, had talked about just where we play as coaches
Mhm.
in that human to human conversation and really understanding the person that's sitting across from us or sitting next to us, however you want to have that. Like that's where the money or the value in the coaching is.
I
And
agree.
and I think for some reason I'm really in agreement. It is like some of it is sensing and just really learning to trust myself as a coach to acknowledge what I'm sensing.
Hmm.
How do you find that? How did you develop that sensing part?
I don't know. I'd like to say it's sort of innate. I don't know if it was raised in through, living with a parent who is pretty intuitive, I would say. I think, I do think it's something we can learn. And yet at the same time, I always wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So there's always this piece, where I try to really understand people and listen. And I think the more intent we are on really understanding people, I and really listening, I do think we open ourselves up in a way that we don't otherwise. When we're so busy thinking, we're not available to what the cues are. But I think as we really do start to listen, the cues are there. And the more of it that we do, it's like building any muscle, right? I think we build that muscle as time goes on. At least, I don't know about the two of you, but the more I coach, the easier that becomes. It's easy. You kind of know when you're in that place where you're in that flow of just listening. And to your point, Matt, I think we also I'll speak for myself. I'd love to know about you both, but you get comfortable with, because you're so sincerely interested in this person, that it just feels natural to ask, like, hey, I'm hearing this, or hey, it sounds like, do you want to talk about that? And I think people sense that back. They sense the fact that you really care about them. And they're then therefore willing to talk with you. It's pretty magical.
Yeah. So, when did you know you wanted to be a coach, Mary?
Oh, for a really long time. I think I've sort of danced around this my entire career. I forget which book I was reading. God, do we read a lot of books? But it talked about the fact that, at a soul level, we all really basically know what we want to do. And yet when we don't pursue it, it's interesting how we dance all around it. And if I look at my career, I really danced all around coaching. I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and I didn't do that. So I went into what was at the time personnel. Now I've dated myself, but into HR, and I thought, well, I'm close enough to people, this is where it's all about relationship. And then I went and I worked with families and kids. And then I went back into industry. And then I finally thought, okay, let me get closer to being a psychologist. And I became a coach. And finally got as close as I could to what I thought I really wanted to be through coaching. And then I realized this is really because of the fact that coaching is forward looking. It's really taking what is. It's enough. We look back enough to understand, but it's really about looking forward. And that to me is so positive that I wouldn't want to do the psych now. Now I'm really pleased to just be doing the coaching. So it's been an evolution. I'm not, I remember Coach U being established in the early 90s. I was pretty intrigued at that point. So I guess it's been around for a while, my interest.
So let me just ask so since someone who's been interested since the 90s, what do you think?
Don't ask me how old I am, Matt.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to ask you that. What do you think coaches need? Like, what do you think coaches need to stop or start doing if they want to stay relevant? Like, what advice would you? I know you've introduced me to your daughter, new in sort of all of this area, this discipline.
Yep.
What does she need to do in order to stay relevant?
I think you just have to get to know yourself and have confidence in who you are and what you bring, so that you move that noise out of the way. And I think if your noise is out of the way, you can be fully present to your clients. And I think that's important, whether you're coaching or just living life. Let's move our stuff out of the way, and then we can really be present for the people we care about and who we're with in whatever capacity.
I one of my first introductions to coaching, the lady kind of looked at me and laughed. And she says, well, if you want to be a coach, you have to like get some self-awareness.
So true.
And I was like, what do you mean? I'm totally self-aware.
What store do you buy that at?
Yeah, tell me.
I mean, I can't believe she would say that. I was so unaware. Anyway, Mary, what's a bold belief about leadership or coaching that you have that maybe not everyone agrees with? Maybe you can share a little bit around some of your your forays into change leadership or anything like that.
Yeah, I guess It's actually pretty simple. I think leadership really is, it's solely about relationship. And I do think that we continue to think about leadership as either a role or a hierarchical level or a responsibility to create productivity, because we talk about leadership so often in the corporate space. But I do think all of those things get accomplished if fundamentally you're about the people you are leading. And in that case, it has to be about relationship. It has to be your concern about what's going on for that person, both in terms of productivity and in terms of emotion. And I think we have to get to that level. The good news is I think workers or employees, associates are looking more and more for that. So there's a greater demand that leaders lead in that way. And yet it sounds so easy, and we know it's not that easy. It's something you've got to choose and then cultivate if it's not your natural inclination.
It makes
What do you
me
think?
think, it makes me think that uh, what makes leaders attractive is their ability to build that relationship with other people. And so
Totally
much
agree.
so that I want to be around that.
Yeah.
And I'll do whatever they ask, even whatever that, and then some. I'll either do that voluntarily or I'll do it when they ask me without any complaint because I'll want to do it with that person.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. I think that's where, like, when we really care about someone, that's where the trust comes in. I've in my career, I've been told it's mumbo jumbo. And so I fully understand that there's perspectives out there, and yet, that see things that way about leadership. But I do think that, and the experience has shown, right, when we connect with people because we care about them, they're going to trust you. And if they trust you, they're then going to follow you, or they're going to react in the way that you've just described. So I think the greatest challenge really is how do we help people to get comfortable in that space, and especially in the workplace. It's hard enough in our families and in our most important, our most close relationships, never mind with people at work, which those relationships are a little more distant. So
Yeah.
that's my belief.
I like it. What do you want in a coach, Mary, for yourself?
I want someone who will really like hold up that mirror and hold me accountable for the things that I'm saying and really check in on what I'm saying. Like, help me to hear my words differently. Help me to hear it differently so that I can check in on a perspective or really consider some new perspective. Because it's so hard sometimes to be our own coaches. And I really look for that alternate perspective, that I can create for myself, because I think that's where the growth happens. And so I think, that there's that book about coaching with backbone. I really like a coach who coaches with backbone and isn't afraid to really challenge me and challenge the things I'm saying and connect those dots for me in ways that I'm not hearing or seeing.
Yeah. Mary, I know you're a book reader, so can you what do you listen to? What do you read? Like, what's your recommendations? Someone that's new to coaching, or a leadership book that you thought, hey, look, this is really interesting. What do you recommend typically when someone asks for a leadership book?
Yeah. One of my favorites is actually Leading Without Authority, by Keith Ferrazzi. And I like that book because it debunks the hierarchical perspective on leadership, right from the start. And the other piece about that book that I really like is it talks about the importance of leaders really understanding and thinking about why they invest in stakeholder relationships. And especially today, right? It's so easy to look down verticals as leaders, especially if you're a little bit hierarchical in your orientation, or even if you're not. It's just the demands at work make leaders think that way in the workplace. And this book is really all about the horizontal. And, the horizontal and all the different ways in which you are trying to influence an organization. And my experience in working with leaders, as well as my belief in leadership, both speak to that horizontal need. It's because you need people to cooperate with you, yes, but you also need to invest in those relationships and think about it very systematically and choose to lead in a way where you're cultivating those relationships. It doesn't just happen if we don't think about it. So I really like that book for that reason. And in your broader question, I listen to tons of podcasts, yours, of course. Gosh, I don't know. They're too numerous. I'll just go in and sometimes just do a search on a topic and just look around and see, who's talking about it, and just flip around and find the information, some new information that maybe I hadn't thought about yet. But I use podcasts a lot because if I'm working out or if I'm driving somewhere, it's just an easy way to consume some of that information.
All right, Dave, what's your reflections on what Mary had to share?
The sensing to synthesizing. I can't say it. I have to say it 3 times fast. It really got me thinking. Like, there's the way you describe it is there's clutter that you have to declutter, both what's in your what's going on for your client, but as well as you have to declutter yourself as a coach. It got me thinking a lot about that. And it's always great to reconnect with folks that we've been talking about coaching for a decade. So it's really fabulous to reconnect. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you know what? I this is not really a confessional moment, but I am still going to actually sort of put it out there. This idea around sensing and synthesizing. That's been a hard thing for me as a coach, to really kind of put something out there that I'm sensing. And I keep reflecting back on a time I did it and just botched it. And the client was like, nope, that's not what's going on at all. So if you're listening and that's happened to you, hey, join the club. But I think, I think that practice or that discipline or that attribute of coaching does, like you said, it just, for some people it may come easier, but for those of us, it's something that we kind of have to try not to use lean into, but it is something that we have to kind of learn into and be willing to trust, hey, this sense that we have about a situation. Because what I've heard you share, if you want that type of coach that's willing to reflect back to you what we're hearing in it, maybe it'll be different, but it's a different voice, and that gives perspectives to the client, even if it's totally wrong.
Agree. Yeah.
That it would be. Yeah. Mary, what's the best way people, if they're interested in connecting with you, what's the best way that people can find you?
Yeah, best way for now is via email, probably. Do you have that address? Do you want me to share that here?
Maybe I would recommend probably LinkedIn, maybe even the best
or
way.
LinkedIn.
Way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Start that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And there's email information in there as well.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
Thanks.
Dave?
Yeah. And a shout out to our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Mary, it has been a pleasure talking to you. So enjoyed reconnecting.
Same here. Thank you both very much. Good to see you both.
And until next time, keep leading with courage, keep learning, and remember, your character is your greatest asset.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Big thanks to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting. If you're ready to unlock your leadership potential and make the impact you're meant to make, visit charactermatterscoaching.com and connect with Matt about transforming your team or organization. If this conversation sparks something for you, share it with a fellow leader who needs to hear it. And don't forget, all of today's resources are waiting for you in the show notes. Until next time, keep discovering your secret sauce.